Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm Howell Davis with today's discussion. Dozens of new free schools opened their doors in Britain this academic year. They're called free because they're semi-independent, paid for by the state, but allowed some latitude in what they teach. Many of them are Christian schools, and they've been calling for the right to teach creationism and intelligent design. Creationism is the theory that God created the universe in a single event. Intelligent design says there's a divine creator who has designed the current state of life on Earth. Both ideas are obviously at odds with Darwin's theory of evolution, and creationism has proved highly controversial. The government has now barred anti-evolution groups from teaching it in science classes. But the clamour to be allowed to teach it hasn't abated. So to discuss this, I'm joined by Professor Lewis Wolpert, a Vice President of the British Humanist Association, a development biologist, author and broadcaster, by Dr. Aladdin Bourras from the Muslim Association of Britain, and on the phone we're joined by Roger Stanyard, a founder of the British Centre for Science Education, and by Dr. Sylvia Baker, a founder of New Independent Christian School, a teacher with a PhD in faith and education. May I start by talking to Professor Wolpert? This battle between evolutionists and people who want to teach creationism, how long has it actually been going on in Britain?
Don't really know, but it's become much stronger in recent years. These terms, intelligent design, I can't remember when they came into being, but I think it's really quite recent. But of course, for a developmental biologist like myself, these ideas are, just to put it bluntly, nonsense. There's not a shred of evidence for intelligent design or creationism, but these people claim that Darwin's theory of evolution cannot explain the enormous variety of animals and plants that we see around us.
Sylvia Baker, that's a very trenchant criticism of what you believe. How would you respond to that?
Well, I can give you some facts, if you like. Creationism goes back a long way. I'm sure you know most of the heroes of science, most of the founders were in fact creationists. In fact, they were young earth, biblical literalist creationists. That was such a rich worldview that enabled science to get going. Now, as regards the current state in this country, well, I became a creationist while at Sussex University doing a biology degree in 1965. So you can see it's been around in this country a long time. As regards intelligent design, that is a more recent movement, and it's one with a very specific definition that came into being in the 80s and developed strongly in the 90s and continues to develop strongly. And it has a single, very clear tenet, which is that living things show evidence, scientific evidence of having been designed. I have a great respect for Professor Wolpert. I read his material when I was at university in the 60s, let alone later, but I feel very insulted by what he has just said, because I am not some ignorant person who doesn't know any biology. I am somebody with a different worldview. It happens to be the worldview that got modern science going. It's a rich worldview. I'm sure all of us here today want the same thing. We want good teaching for the children, good science teaching. That is certainly what I want. I have a science background. I have 2 biology degrees. I've worked in a research lab, and I'm certainly not anti-science, and my creationism is founded on evidence.
Professor Wolpert?
Yes, I'd love to know what your evidence is. I mean, just let me put it bluntly, I don't know of any evidence for a creator.
Well, that's a completely different debate, because a creator being an uncreated being is not created. So that is a completely different debate. It's a theological debate. I would be happy to pursue that debate. It's most interesting. But that's not where I'm coming from. If I could just tell you what happened to me, I went to university as a convinced evolutionist. I'd been led to believe there was overwhelming evidence. I wasn't actually presented with the evidence till A-level, and at that point it seemed to me to be rather weak, but I thought that was simply because I didn't know it enough. And when I got to university, there'd be a lot more that I would find out that would be convincing. Now, I was a Christian, but I was also an evolutionist, as very many Christians are. I believe for the same reason that they don't really understand what's going on with this debate, but there's a huge mixture of things. there's a mixture of real science in evolution, and there's a lot that isn't real science. And it's when you tease that out that you begin to see where all of this is going. So I would love to have a debate about whether God exists or not, but what I'm concerned about is the closing down of debate that we're seeing now. And I don't know, I mean, it's so un-British to be saying that something is banned, particularly the discussion of scientific evidence. We're supposed to debate the evidence. This is what I had impressed on me at science at university by Professor John Maynard Smith and his department. That's where I was studying biology, and he's a leading evolutionist for those who have never heard of him, world-renowned, and I had the greatest respect for him and learnt so much from him and his colleagues. And the main thing I learned was that you critique things in science. You are not spoon-fed it. You are not dictated to. You weigh the evidence. And I taught science from a creationist perspective in a school for 27 years, and I saw the children come out at the end with overwhelmingly good results. That's something that can be verified.
Sorry, Aladdin Bourras, can I bring you in here? What's the Muslim perspective on this?
Yes, actually, before talking about this issue from a religious point of view, I would like to highlight some very important points. Me as a Muslim, I consider that this idea, the idea of the theory of evolution, is a powerful idea, which means it explains some phenomena in our world. And from a religious point of view, the scientific methodology is, as a methodology, is a good and sound methodology. From a very specifically point of view, we consider as a Muslim that God is the creator, even if some of my of people who are here do not agree with the existence of God. So we do believe that God exists, and this is why we consider that God created us from a male and a female. So in some religious verses, mainly from Quran, we can see that God says that, "O mankind, we have created you from a male and female and made you into nations and tribes." And from one of our Prophet's hadith, one of his sayings, he explains this verse saying that a human being are the children of Adam, and Adam was created from earth. So for me, there's no really contradiction between the theory of evolution when it comes to animals, because nothing says in Quran or in our Prophet says contradicts the theory of evolution when it comes to animals. But when it comes to human beings, we consider that we were created from earth and that our father is Adam.
But aren't you doing, in effect, is saying you will go along with theory of evolution where it suits you, but where it doesn't suit you, you'll ignore it?
No, it's not. Actually, as I said from the beginning, that Islam has no problem with scientific methodology and proofs, and that science brings. But the point is that we have. The theory of evolution has a lot of holes. It does not really respond to all the questions about creation. I don't know. I don't think that it gives. I looked. I have a French background, where in France there's a very huge debate right now, even within the Muslim community and the the Ministry of Education, about introducing this issue into the school program. And as I said, for me, it's not. It does respond to some questions in our actual world, in some phenomena, to some phenomena. But when it comes to the creation of the human being, no, it has a lot of holes. It has a lot of holes without answers.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia. I'm Howell Davis with today's discussion on the teaching of creationism and intelligent design in schools. Roger Stanyard, this seems to be a very difficult problem for people trying to teach in schools. You're stuck between all these cross currents. How do you decide between them?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of debating this in school, particularly in the United States, of course. It's actually illegal to teach it. The real issue, it's a political issue coming out of the United States from very conservative religious fundamentalists who see education as a matter probably of social engineering. We already know this from the Discovery Institute, that their ultimate objective is social re-engineering along right-wing evangelical lines, conservative evangelical lines. But I think in the United Kingdom, the position is very different here because we don't have separation of church and state. What is, I think, a very great significance, Sylvia Baker brought this up about public debate on this, within science in the United Kingdom, in the two key areas that creationism challenges, which is evolutionary biology and geology, the old age of the Earth, there simply is no debate among scientists. We spent about 6 years researching this, and we've only managed to come across one practicing scientist in the whole of the United Kingdom in the key areas of evolutionary biology and geology who is a young Earth creationist. One person against the rest is not exactly a matter of public debate here amongst scientists. And I think asking school teachers to push forward a fundamentalist evangelical religious viewpoint within science is highly questionable ethics there on it. Every time we dig around on this issue, we find the same group of about 50 to 70 fundamentalist evangelical activists promoting creationism in the UK. It's not a widespread viewpoint on it. It's not held by the Catholic Church. It's not held by the Church of England. And when we dug around this, we only actually found about 4 main groups of evangelicals who were pushing this, and they were not mainstream. They were mostly people in independent evangelical churches, independent Baptist churches outside the main Baptist Union, Plymouth Brethren churches, and one of the other rather fragmented groups of Pentecostal churches. So, in a sense, it's not really, the argument this is a Christian viewpoint and should be got into science because it's sound science looks to me to be extremely spurious.
Can we just bring in Sylvia Beck here? How do you respond to that? You're part of a small group of activists who have no wider currency in the wider British society.
Well, there are at least 2 surveys now that suggest that 30% of practicing Christians in the UK are creationists. Because since leaving teaching, I've actually gone into this kind of research. And if I could pick up on some other things that Roger has said, he seems very surprised that he can only find one, that his organisation can only find one working creationist scientist in biology or geology. Well, that is not at all surprising. I mean, look what happened to Professor Michael Rice, who is himself an evolutionist. He lost his prestigious job at the Royal Society simply for suggesting that creationist pupils should be treated with respect. I'm afraid that if I thought the British Centre for Science Education, if I was a working biologist, I previously was, but if I was one now, I would run a mile from the British Centre for Science Education because they are simply a campaigning group against creationism. So it's not at all surprising that they can't find people who are willing to own up to it. And I certainly know more than that, and more working geologists and biologists than that, and they are very afraid of losing their positions. This is a terrible state that our country has got in, Where a small group, I would suggest that it's the British Centre for Science Education that's a small group, if you don't mind me saying so, of people who have not by and large got biology degrees. I don't know if Roger has, or a geology degree. I don't know if he's got that. I don't know if he's even got anything to do with education. I think they are largely people who wish to silence creationists. And this brings me back to our main topic, the dealing with this issue in the classroom, where, whether you like it or not, a significant percentage of pupils come from creationist backgrounds. It's not one or two, it's many. And this was exactly what motivated Professor Michael Rice to say the things he did. He's an evolutionist himself, but he had seen with his own eyes in the classroom the treatment they get, not only from fellow pupils, but from teachers sometimes as well, regrettably. Mocked in a way that would not be permitted in any other context.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you. Just turning to Lewis Wolpert. You are a developmental biologist. Yes. Do you think that there are many scientists who actually do believe in creationism?
No, I don't know any. I certainly don't know a single one. And I think it's all about evidence. And I think, if you want to teach creationism in a religious class, that's fine. But in any way to link it to science or to real, Darwinian evolution seems to me to be absolutely unacceptable. I mean, if you could give me one single example that actually shows that intelligent design really is something that we should take seriously, I think that would be helpful. But there is zero science in creationism or intelligent design. These are religious beliefs, and people are entitled to have religious beliefs, but we mustn't mix them up with science, and particularly with young people.
Aladdin Barras?
For me, as I said, as a Muslim, I consider that our religion, and as a lot of other religions also, it brings answers to these kind of questions. So I'm repeating myself in saying that we have the theory of evolution has a lot of holes. It does not respond to all the questions that we have.
I don't think it does have a lot of holes. Like what?
I don't know, which means the evolution of the human being. Our grandparents, were they monkeys? What is
yes, they were. Yes, our great grandparents were monkeys. Yes.
But where have that been proven? Which means until now we are. Recently, a very new conference was held in Dubai recently, where there's a lot of scientific from all over the world participate in that, and they are minimizing from the importance of the theory of evolution. I don't know how to say that, but I have a strong belief that we are going to one day we are going to say that this theory is not really. We are going to go back to the religious text regarding this issue, saying that there is a God. And the theory of evolution for me is not really. I'm really sorry to say that, but it's not really responding to all the questions that we have.
Professor Wolf?
Well, I'd just like to know which question that you have problem with, and I can help you.
Yes,
just think how similar your body is to many of the apes. We are very ape-like in many of our characters. Yes. And also the fossil evidence is very good that we descended from ape-like animals. And the genetic evidence. And I'm absolutely amazed that you accept this theory of evolution, except when it comes to human beings. That's bizarre.
Yes, because so what about monkeys that we have right now? Why, if we are saying that human beings were monkeys before, so in these days, what about monkeys who are monkeys now? Why didn't they evolve to become human beings?
Because some became very successful monkeys. That's the theory of evolution. If you're being successful, you don't have to change. You don't, that it's just that they didn't evolve. Remember, we're going back a very long way from the ancestral ape. It's a long way back. And some have remained the same, or they evolved into present-day monkeys, and others evolved into human beings.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia. I'm Howell Davis with today's discussion on the teaching of creationism in schools. I'm joined by Professor Lewis Wolpert, Dr. Aladdin Bourras from the Muslim Association of Britain, Roger Stanyard, a spokesman and founder of the British Centre for Scientific Education, and by Dr. Sylvia Baker, a founder of New Independent Christian School with lots of teaching experience and a PhD in faith and education. Roger Stannard, I think you were trying to get in on that discussion earlier. What did you want to say?
One of the issues clearly here is public opinion on this, that the debate is about getting creationism into state schools, not about the private schools that Sylvia Baker represents. There is no debate on that. If private schools want to debate creationism, they're absolutely free to do it. The issue is on state schools on this, and I just cannot see how Sylvia Baker can claim as a Pentecostal to represent either the broad stream of Christianity or the huge number of schools in the United Kingdom that are controlled or owned by the Church of England and the Roman Catholic Church, and in one or two cases the Methodist Church on this. This is not mainstream religion. This is an American import from the early 1970s. And, I really question about the sort of thrust and direction that she wants to take state education in the United Kingdom on it. There's no debate on creationism amongst scientists. It's a religious position.
Sylvia Baker, the government has actually barred anti-evolution groups from teaching creationism in science classes for state schools.
Well, I'm trying to raise with you the wider issue of whether that is just and fair and whether it's good for the pupils themselves, because in the New Scientist just 2 weeks ago, there was a detailed article, and I've been aware of this research as it's been coming out, about the children are born believers. They're basically born looking at the world through creationist eyes. And some of the stuff that's quoted there, it would be very good for everybody to read it, shows that this has to be knocked out of them. So basically, schools are knocking out of pupils something that is inherently we're hardwired with. We look out on the world and it's obvious to us that it's designed. Now, you have to have very, very good evidence if you're going to do that. Can I just deal with some of the evidence? Because I have been in this since the mid-1960s, so I have seen a lot of things happen in that time, and I've learned a lot myself. Of course, I don't know everything, of course, and I make mistakes, of course. By the way, I'm not a Pentecostal, and I don't know why Roger thinks I am. I currently attend a mainline Baptist Union church. So, you see, he is wrong on that and on many, many things, I can tell you. The website is riddled.
Can you just get to your specific point?
Problems like that. Yes, okay, but I did want to correct that because it was an error said about me publicly, wasn't it? So, can I tell you that when I first started speaking on this subject, because I do speak on it at a popular level, I used to say the fossil record shows evidence of catastrophe. And I would get mocking and derision, because at that time, and we're only talking the 1970s, not very long ago, if you believed that there was evidence of catastrophe in the fossil record, you were mocked and derided as a complete ignorant fool. Now, it's widely recognized that the fossil record shows catastrophe, exactly as the earliest geologists believed. So we are going backwards. We are moving back towards the position that gave rise to modern science. Now, another whole area, when I first started speaking, I would say there is no evidence whatsoever of a living cell emerging from non-living materials. I would be mocked and derided. But of course now that is the standard view. And so all of a sudden abiogenesis is supposed to be something completely different from evolution. Well, I can tell you it wasn't when I was at university 40 or 50 years ago. So you see, creationism is a very evidence-based thing. Now, another thing I used to say to my pupils was, but I would say that there is this view that an awful lot of the DNA, huge amounts of it, are what they used to term junk. And I would say to them, from my worldview, my creationist design worldview, I don't believe it is junk. I believe they should be looking for the purposes for that DNA. Now, of course, that is something that is also happening now. So this is a creationist education, you see. It's looking at the evidence and saying, look, does the fossil record show evidence of catastrophe, or does it show this gradualism that evolution requires?
Sorry,
does
Professor,
the DNA, is it full of junk?
Thank you, Sylvia Baker. Yes, I think you've made your point here. Professor Wolpert,
Okay.
Can we just...
I think the crucial point is the origin of life, the origin of the first cell, has not yet been solved. There are interesting models and interesting theories, but the problem still remains. But there's no evidence to believe that it involved creationism, because the models are really are very stimulating, but there still remain problems. And when you come to the DNA, which bits of the DNA you should analyze and what it's all there for, there are hard problems. There are lots of difficult problems in biology, but that doesn't mean to say that it has anything to do with creationism.
Roger Stanyard, what comes across sometimes is both sides wanting to stick to their own small area. Is there not grounds for saying, well, schools could teach both evolution and creationism?
I think there's no real debate of whether this should or should not be taught in religious education as a religious viewpoint on this. It's not a controversial issue from that sense. The issue is getting into science lessons, because it undermines the whole of science. It just doesn't undermine biology. It undermines geology. It undermines chemistry. It undermines physics. And we've also seen from, the tracking what the creationist movement have up to the United Kingdom, they've tried to get into areas such as mathematics as well on this. And that is well documented. That was documented on the stuff posted on the website of the Christian Institute in Newcastle on this. So it's a much broader issue on this. As I say, at the end of the day, this is a political issue of conservative evangelicals wanting to get their form of religion into state education, rather than taking, I think, the liberal view that we're all entitled to hold whatever religious opinions we feel comfortable with. This is one where they're trying to use state money to fund their proselytizing of fundamentalist evangelicalism. It doesn't sound very democratic in my viewpoint. As Sylvia Baker points out, that 30% of Christians are creationists. Well, only about 6% of people in the United Kingdom are in church on a Sunday. And even if you take the most widespread view of this, perhaps 10% of the population go to church regularly on this. And only about, from what we can figure out, about a tenth of those actually understand even the basics of the creationist arguments.
I just want to put this point to Aladdin Boras. You're not a Christian, but would you be happy to see creationism taught in religious studies rather than, say, biology classes?
Yes, I'll be very happy, because I think people with different beliefs, they do need to study and to have an idea about these different ideas, these different principles, and to, by the end of the day, to choose what is really more logical for them. So I do believe that it is a normal right that students at universities, at schools, should have the right to study all of these theories.
Professor Wolpert, would you see, if you kept them separately in separate classes, that would be okay? If one was in religious education, other ones in biology?
Better than having them together. But I'm against it altogether. In fact, maybe what one really should have at school is children actually looking at religion from a scientific point of view. It would be very interesting, actually, to consider what is the actual evidence for God. I claim there is zero evidence for God, and I think that would be quite interesting for children.
Okay, well, it doesn't sound like we're going to get any consensus coming out from around this discussion table. Thank you very much, all of you. I was joined by Professor Lewis Wolpert, Vice President of the British Humanist Association, Dr. Aladdin Boras from the Muslim Association of Britain, Roger Stanyard down the line from the British Centre for Science Education, and Dr. Sylvia Baker, a founder of the New Independent Christian School. Thank you all for coming along, and you carry on disagreement outside, I suspect. You're listening to The Voice of Russia.